I just had a client yesterday who came in and he was like talking to me about it and goes, yeah, but what about that generation that sees Israel become a nation again shall not pass away till they see the end of days. And I was like, did you quote a Bible verse just now? And he was like, well, yeah, that's what it says. I'm like, you think that's a Bible verse, don't you?
We want to talk a little bit about Ian Carroll, canceled this clothing company guy, and he was just on Joe Rogan, which is quite a big deal because it's kind of like, it feels like one of us has gotten onto Joe Rogan. I mean, like a TikToker to Rogan fame. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but I want to show one of his videos because he's been doing the podcast circuit big time. And he was just on the Hodge Twins podcast. And I absolutely loved what he said here.
Do you guys know about the Schofield Bible? Oh boy, here's a rabbit hole for you. Here's a rabbit hole for all of us. In the early 1900s, right around when the Federal Reserve was founded and the Balfour Declaration happened, right at that exact same time, the Rothschild family hired this dude, this pastor in the Deep South. He made a new version of the Bible called the Schofield Bible. He wrote this new Bible that has all these new interpretations of the text. So they didn't change.
Jewish influence.
Yes, literally. That's where Judeo-Christianity kind of came from. And the idea that Israel is this modern Israel thing is the Israel of the Bible. It came from that Bible. And the Schofield Bible was funded by the Rothschild family. And then it was pushed because they owned the publisher that publishes like all the books. I think it was Oxford Press. And so they had the deals that they could make to get that Bible into all the mega churches across whole denominations of Christianity. And so that was when Christianity got kind of Jewified.
Jewified. That's a good word.
That was his word. But yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, it's interesting to hear him talk about that. And obviously we had a thing, I think, was it the guy from Big Rich? I think, I don't really know that guy's name. I don't listen to country music. But he was on with Tucker Carlson. And they were talking about the Schofield Study Bible, too.
What you're saying is the Schofield Bible, its theology is deceptive.
A very wealthy, very charismatic preacher named John Darby came with this doctrine that's now referred to as the secret rapture or the pre-tribulation rapture. And guess who he was connected to, by the way? The Rothschilds.
Interesting.
Have you ever heard of a Schofield Bible?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So C.I. Schofield was basically a student of John Darby, and he adopted that part of the doctrine, and he incorporated that into the Bible. It was the first Bible ever made that had study notes with it. It became so popular, every Christian was reading it, every minister was reading it, including me, including my own father. For a long time, that's what we believed too. But when you start actually going back and reading line by line by line what is said that will be leading up to Jesus coming back, which is when the rapture happens, it's the inverse of what John Darby put down. My
sense was the Schofield stuff, which has had massive implications for our foreign policy, for example, and in our domestic politics, was probably a lie. I do know that translation or that commentary on the Bible has had massive effects on our politics that have been very, very negative and resulted in the deaths of a lot of people.
I mean, people are waking up. People are learning this kind of stuff. And it's like, I don't think that people realize how much that has influenced people. And yet, I guess I knew about the Schofield Bible, but I was not quite aware about the exact dates. But if you really think about it, because he mentioned on the podcast, he mentioned the Balfour Declaration, which the Rothschilds made with like the English in order to get Palestine to become the nation of Israel. And so this is like right around the exact same time this is being influenced. And it's like, even think about like a biblical generation. So I think the Schofield Bible, the earliest publishing was like 1907. Well, then 1948, Israel becomes a nation. That's at the 40 years in the Bible, you know, like the 40 years of influence. So by the time Israel becomes a state, it's like, man, they really primed the world for that.
They were setting it up for sure. It was a big, huge setup, and it's still being set up for something even bigger that we don't even know what's coming. Like they've been plotting for a minute. I wonder if it comes down to that. What is not the Hannibal directive? What is the other one where they launch the nukes when everybody attacks them and they just nuke everybody supposedly?
I don't know what that's called. I'm not sure.
The Samson option. That's what it's called. Yeah, because Samson took down the pillars and destroyed everything.
He killed himself at the same time.
Exactly. Well, that's the point. Is like Israel's got this thing called the Samson option, where they're like, when everybody starts to realize, hey, yo, you're the bad guy, they hit a button and the nukes go flying everywhere. Like that might be what they're kind of leading to in this regard, possibly. That's my theory. I don't know.
Well, that's a little dark. I was just thinking about that, and I almost made a podcast about this the other day, just mentioning, and I've mentioned it a few times just recently. I was just doing the math on the whole fig tree generation. So the fig tree generation, 1948. Yeah, like that dispensational idea that was obviously the seeds were planted from the Schofield Bible big time of why we think this is leading to the end times. So you got this nation of Israel established in 1948. And then again, a biblical generation is 40 years. You have 40 years in the wilderness. King Saul was king for 40 years. King David was king for 40 years. King Solomon was king for 40 years.
Oh, I didn't know that.
You go through the book of Judges, there's all these 40 years, I think 40 days and 40 nights it rains. Jesus was resurrected. He appeared for 40 days.
Interesting.
The spies in the land of Canaan were in there for 40 days. 40 is the number. So when they try to say now that, again, that's 77 years ago that they became a nation. I think we got to just put that to bed. And I think that might be the last remnants of this dispensational man-made doctrine that's not biblical. Let's just sweep that away right now. Can we just do that? Because I think that at this point that even the dispensationalists would have to say that we still need a third temple, and then we need a 7-year tribulation. So anybody who would have been born, even if they were born the year it was established, those people will be 77 years old. And then you got to add 7 years to that. Now they're in their 80s. So anybody with there is likely there's the last people who are probably still alive or who actually came into the land at that time. They're either in their early 90s or they'd be over 100 years old when the 7-year tribulation finishes up.
Dude, it seems pretty silly, but there is that argument that like, oh, well, 80 years is a generation according to the Bible in some regard, because there's that verse that refers to if a man's life lives to be 80, it's a good life or something like that. I forget what it is.
Yeah, but that's no, because
No.
Well, because it's like
I'm just trying to be the devil's advocate for them, like
right, but we're not talking. But we're not talking about a whole lifetime.
That's true. We're not.
It's not a whole lifetime.
Generation of living.
Like I said, I mean, the clearest biblical example of a generation is the way it's laid out when the spies come back from the land of Canaan. They don't think they can take it. They don't believe God will actually help them take it. They're scared of the giants. They come back in. They give the report about Nephilim, and they basically say we can't do it. There's 45 cities. These people are really big. It can't be done. Joshua and Caleb say they can. They believe what the Lord says. But then God says, I'm going to give you 1 year for every day you spy out of the land, 40 years. So he says, this generation will not make it in. And so there's even shows a dividing line between the Israelites who were under the age of 20. They were allowed to get in. But the ones who were above 20, 40 years after that, they all passed away and they could not get in. So and so it specifically says a generation. That generation did not get in. And so it makes sense because it's like we don't really view generations like that either. Because you would say something different. The lifetime. Yeah, when Jesus says this generation, we know the people watching this know what he meant.
Yeah, exactly.
The people he was talking to. The people who were obviously of the mind who could understand what he's saying.
But bro,
the adults.
But bro, the third temple is about to be built, and they're going to sacrifice the red heifers that were magically, spontaneously born in Texas, and you're missing all the prophecies, bro. It's happening right before your eyes. Can't you see it? Sorry.
I mean, even I know that not every dispensational believes this, but some do. That they believe the coming back into the land in 1948 was the second Exodus that's talking about from Jeremiah. It's not. Obviously, that second Exodus is literally when they went into captivity in Babylon, and then they came out of it.
Yeah.
And then they went back into the land when the second temple was being rebuilt. So, but if they believe that, you'd have to say it's like that. So God brought them back into the land just so they could just die out, and then he could do all this other stuff later. I mean, again, this is literally a house of cards. There's really nothing scriptural to back any of this stuff up. And I think it's being exposed, and it's being exposed largely because now we have the receipts. It's like, look who put this Bible together. It's the same people who put the Balfour Declaration together. Lord Rothschild. Do you guys know who he is? Obviously, we can't even say too much about him because obviously that triggers warning bells over on the YouTube algorithm. But yeah, like, so when you know who funded it, who funded that Bible, like, why would he fund that Bible?
Unless there was an agenda.
Like I said,
you trying to do something.
You see the agenda. It is interesting. So now we have this generation of Christians, multiple generations of Christians, support Israel no matter what, even if they do wicked things, and we'll turn a blind eye when they do. So now, but you actually do have people waking up and saying, "Hey, like, I'm not okay with supporting them no matter what now." And the more people openly talk about like the Schofield Bible and why we have this dispensational belief, or like people like us questioning, is like, that's not in the Bible at all. All the things you guys are talking about, the things you're basing your eschatology on, it's like, it's based on the Rothschilds.
Bro, I just had a client yesterday who came in and he was like talking to me about it, and he's like, and I mentioned something about it, and he goes, yeah, but what about that generation that sees Israel become a nation again shall not pass away till they see the end of days. And I was like, did you quote a Bible verse just now? And he was like, well, yeah, that's what it says. I'm like, you think that's a Bible verse, don't you? And he was like, yeah, they shall not pass away till this generation. And I'm like, let me just pull up the verse that you're referring to. So I pulled up the verse, and I read him the verse, and it was like, comes from the fig tree. It says, take a lesson from the fig tree.
Right.
When you see the fig tree begin to ripen or whatever.
When it stretches out its branches and starts to bud, summer's near.
And I was like, does that sound like when you see Israel become a nation again, that generation shall not pass away till they see the end of days? And he was like, oh my gosh. He's like, you're not. He's like, he was blown away. I was like, he's like, there's got to be another verse. And I'm like, no, that's the verse. And he was like, how come I thought that was a Bible verse? I was like, because you've been brainwashed to believe something that was a lie. Mind you, I believed it too. So I was like, this is the truth. I'm telling you right now, that's not what it says. It doesn't say anything about Israel like that. It's referring to it's an analogy. Okay. Well, and it has nothing to do with that understanding.
Well, I wonder if like what he's getting, it's like he's getting somebody interpreting it with the study notes that are at the bottom, like what that means in that Bible. It says, oh, this is what this means, is when they go back in, it's going to happen. But yeah, like Vitaly brought that up, and I continue to bring that up. It was like saying that when they try to stretch this parable out to be longer than it is, it literally is just like Jesus is saying, just like the fig tree, just how it's just like when when it's summer's near, when you see all these things, you'll know that the kingdom of God is near. It's at the gate. And he'll say that, and then he said, truly I tell you, before this generation passes away, all these things will be fulfilled. And, Ricardo said this, and I'll repeat this again because I thought it was such a good point, is that you have to understand, again, you always have to go back to the destruction of the second temple, because that's how the chapter starts, is they talk about how great the temple is. Jesus says it's going to be destroyed. So then they say, when will this be, and what will be the signs? Specifically in Mark 13, in like Luke 21, they ask him, that's all they say. When will this be, and what will be the signs? In the Gospel of Matthew, it also says, in the end of the age and you're coming. But you have to understand, he's telling them the signs before the temple's destroyed. So you got to think, like, you have to move the temple destruction way up into there. So you can't interpret that as as future events, when we know that those signs accompanied the destruction of the temple. Those things came first.
Yeah.
So I thought, it's like the most simple point to make, but it's like, yeah, you can't say that those birth pains are the birth pains now, because he's literally saying those are the birth pains that lead up to the destruction of the temple and ultimately Jerusalem itself.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's Very, very valid point. And when you recognize that, it's like, obviously they were talking about the temple being destroyed at that time. That's why Jesus said, some of you standing here today will not taste death. So you see the Son of Man coming in the clouds. You see, like, he was just like pointing out that you're literally going to be living in it.
Everyone left me. Everyone deserted me. Jesus was always there. When everyone hated me and walked away, Jesus never walked away.